mist. The water that flows over it is fossil water from the end of the last great ice age. Over its 10,000-year life, it has eroded, retreating almost 7 miles to where we experience its wonder today. It is the greatest waterfall in the Northern Hemisphere and a source of life and myth. In another 10,000 years, it will be gone, lost to future generations. No one knows when humans first came to Niagara, but it is believed that they arrived almost 12,000 years ago, as the glaciers of the last ice age receded, leaving enough water in their wake to create the Great Lakes. By 3,000 years ago, it was the Iroquois who had settled here. They were also known as the Haudenosaunee, or people of the Longhouse. Over time, they formed a peaceful coalition of 5 tribes. To the ancient people of Niagara, the greatest of the spirits were the thunder beings who lived under the falls. The name Niagara is said to originate from the native word Anguiaras. It is from the oral traditions of these people that the story of Lualaba, the Maiden of the Mist, comes down to us through time. As a young woman, Lualaba left her village on the river. Some say that she lost her husband and thus her hope of a happy life. Some say that her father promised her as a wife to the king of the Anguiaras nation. It was a great honor, but Lualaba could not love him, for she was in love with another. As she did not wish to bring shame to her family and dishonor to the wise old elder, she was forced to leave her village. Another legend tells of a great snake that lived beneath the river and came to the village to poison the water so he could eat the dead. It was a heroic Lualaba who volunteered to offer herself to the thunder gods in hopes they would help her people. It is said that it was He-No, greatest of all the thunder beings, who caught her and then killed the snake with a thunderbolt. Other versions of the story say the spirit of Lualaba returned to tell her people of the snake so they could destroy it. As it floated downstream, its head and tail caught on opposite sides of the river, creating the semicircle of the falls. Whatever the truth of the legend, there are those who say you can see her still in the rainbow of the mist beneath the falls. It wasn't until the late 17th century that the Europeans came to Niagara. Among them, French explorer Robert Cavelier, better known as La Salle, who would later explore the Mississippi River and Gulf of Mexico. La Salle was charged with developing the lucrative fur trade with the Iroquois. He also dreamed of finding a mythical land route to China. He and his men became snowbound near the Great Lakes in the severe winter of 1678. Franciscan Recollect priest, Father Louis Hennepin, recorded the extraordinary events of the expedition.
The waters of the gorge are too treacherous to navigate. We have abandoned our ship. We have entered that portion of the river Captain Cavalier supposes to be the route to his China Passage. By our calculation, it connects 2 Great Lakes. But it is clear, God has deemed these passages not to be gained with ease. The Indians tell us of an overland route to the lake above. The trail traverses a 300-foot escarpment the natives call Crawl on All Fours. Once on top, we will build a new craft and go on. For 3 days now, the wind has carried a most frightful noise. The Indians murmur among themselves of spirits that inhabit this place. The camp is beset with fear. What God has willed for us, we know not, but we shall march forward, sustained by our faith. In all our journey, nothing I've seen or imagined can be referenced to compare with the wonder of this place the Indians call Thundering Water, Niagara.
With the coming of the explorers, the Europeans learned what the natives had always known. Water was the way west. It was perhaps inevitable that conflict would arise. There were a number of reasons for the War of 1812 between the youthful United States and the British Empire. The British had blocked trade between the Americans and their ally France. American sailors had been captured and forced to serve in the British Navy. And the British supported native tribes who fought American expansion into new territories. Perhaps, too, Americans had an eye on the rich lands above their northern border. On July 25th, 1814, the Battle of Lundy's Lane, one of the bloodiest battles of the war, took place very close to the falls.
How many artillery pieces in the field? Stationary?
They brought them down from the falls. I couldn't tell you for certain. We got a couple of them, but just couldn't get them.
Grab your muskets! Form light section! Move right! Light infantry ready! Fire at will! Retreat!
All told, the battle claimed more than 250 lives and more than 1,100 missing or wounded. The British had the better of the battle, but would soon lose the war. While the war did not solve all issues between the powers of the old and new worlds, by 1846, the boundaries between the United States and Canada had been drawn. By the 1850s, the frontier was gone. Niagara soon became the Mecca for the ordinary folk. In the winter, You could walk across the frozen river below the falls, what locals called the ice bridge, where there were souvenir huts and food vendors. In summer, you could ride the steamboat right up to the falls.
How'd you do? Welcome to Niagara, Your Honor. Thank you.
Presidents, painters, poets, even a future King of England, all came to the new playground. A few brave souls had other ideas and would risk all for a moment of glory. The most famous of Niagara's daredevils, Jean-Francois Gravelet, was better known as the Great Blondin. For over a year, Blondin had been captivated by the falls and knew he must cross the Niagara River on a tightrope or die trying.
Blondin? Oh. Blondin? Blondin? The Prince. Good luck and best wishes to you.
It's an honor. Now, may I extend an invitation? We go in my back and we walk together?
No.
I will walk alone. Let's go. Wait.
It was in June of 1859 that he was ready to make history. He stretched a rope 1,100 feet, connecting the United States and Canada.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Wow.
the great Blondin of France is about to perform an act of true daring, a feat never before attempted by mortal man. Your attention, please. He is about to begin.
He carried a balancing pole weighing 40 pounds and walked out upon a rope only 3 inches in diameter. In the years that followed, more than 10 daredevils would risk their lives following in Blondin's footsteps, including Andrew Jenkins, the professor, who rode a bicycle on a wire; Maria Spalterini, the first woman to walk a wire across the river; and Nick Wallenda, from the famous Flying Wallenda family, who fought strong winds while making a successful crossing in 2012. This trip would be Blondin's first. In the succeeding months, he made 8 additional stunt walks, once with a man on his back. The steamship Lullawalla was only 11 years old when the Civil War broke out. Tourism died, and the boat was sold. Captain Joel Robinson faced the most extraordinary challenge of his life.
They board her on condition I get her downriver. That means taking her through Whirlpool Rapids. They claim it's the most dangerous stretch of white water in the world. They say I shouldn't try, but hell, impossible's a word that old steamboat and I ain't never heard of.
Indeed, Captain Robinson's journey into some of the most powerful rapids in North America was considered by most people to be impossible and perhaps a bit mad. Through the Great Gorge Rapids, then the Whirlpool, and on through the dreaded Devil's Hole Rapids, the steamer was rocked and pounded. The two crew members traveling with Captain Robinson were almost immediately thrown to the deck, hanging on for their lives. Although Captain Robinson had achieved the near impossible and was naturally exuberant,
No chance you got a bit of bailing way.
Where in tarnation you come from?
Upriver,
he never again piloted a steamboat and died in seclusion just 2 years after his great achievement. Annie Taylor was a 63-year-old retired school teacher when she thought of a novel idea, an idea that would become synonymous with Niagara. As a widow, Annie Taylor's motivation was to make enough money to support herself in retirement. While her method to find fame and fortune may have been unique, she was really following in the footsteps of earlier daredevils.
No, I've got to get in first.
Annie had a special barrel made for her stunt, one built from oak and iron, with a mattress added for safety. As very few people wanted to be part of what could turn out to be a suicide stunt, there was resistance to helping her. Annie tested her plan out by sending a cat over in the barrel.
What will they think of their Miss Taylor now, eh?
When the cat survived, Annie set her attempt for her birthday, October 24th, 1901.
Well, bon voyage, Annie.
Thanks, Miller. Oh, no, horse. Don't forget, I need lots of air. Put the lid on, but air.
Concerned about breathing in the confined space, Annie had her friends use a bicycle tire pump to compress enough air into the barrel for her to survive the 5-minute journey to the brink of the falls.
Now, don't forget the cork. Cork? Who's got the cork? I've got the cork. I'm 43. Be quiet, Henry. It's okay. Henry's all right. Not now. Henry, no. Henry, come back here. voyage, Annie!
Bon voyage, Annie.
There she goes. I think that's the end of her, I'll tell ya.
Yeah.
Now, Hector, make sure you tell me before you cut me loose. Hector? Miller?
The barrel was set loose from the American shore. The currents took the barrel toward Horseshoe Falls. The drop, 175 feet, with great piles of rocks below.
Hey, mister, look over there.
Hold the old ball-headed boys. Here she comes. Get over that barrel.
Come on, boys.
She okay?
Annie?
She all right?
She is. She's alive.
Annie Taylor risked her life for fame and fortune. But after initial success telling her story, she lost her beloved barrel to her manager and died in poverty. That she lived at all was remarkable. July 9th, 1960. 7-year-old Roger Woodward and his 17-year-old sister Deanne were taking their first ever boat ride. Jim Honeycutt, their father's co-worker, piloted the boat. In the shallow waters, the outboard motor hit a rock and lost its power.
Can't you get it going?
Come on.
Get your jack, hurry up! Get back! Get back!
Roger was swept over the falls, protected with nothing more than his life preserver. Deanne was pulled from the river only 20 feet from the brink.
Look, over there! Captain! Captain! Get in the water, boy! He's in the water!
Ironically, it was the Maid of the Mist that came to Roger's rescue. Roger unwittingly became the first person to survive being swept over the falls unprotected. The story was an international sensation, and from that day on, Roger's journey was called the Miracle of the Falls.
Let him breathe. Come on, give him air.
What is it about Niagara Falls that has captured the imagination of so many adventurers and thrill seekers to follow in the footsteps of the great Blondin and Andy Taylor? Is it the size of the falls and their sheer power that calls to some to test their strength against that of nature? And why do we continue to come today? Is it to marvel, to learn, to imagine ourselves as discoverers and adventurers? Perhaps. But perhaps it is to experience the power of nature, to search for something greater than ourselves, to see a rainbow in the mist, and connect with the myths, miracles, and magic that abound in this singular place.